following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah, go Cowboys! This is the Cowboys Nation podcast with instant reactions and analysis to breaking news and events in Cowboys Nation.
All right, the party is just getting started here. Well, not really just getting started, but the party continues here in Indianapolis, Indiana. The NFL Combine, the league is on full display. The Cowboys are laying their groundwork for their offseason and for their future. And we've got front office insight. We've got Cowboys Combine insight. We've got an offensive coordinator interview with offensive coordinator Clayton Adams coming up later in the show. A lot of good things happening here on Podcast Nation Combine Edition. Nicole Hutchison joined by the one and only Tommy Arsh. What's up, man? How you doing? How you doing?
Great.
Yeah, you know.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
This is one of the best weeks of the year.
Yeah.
Really fun to get together with everybody, see some of these prospects in person. It's a big data point for the draft process, absolutely, and then getting to talk to Stephen Jones like we did on Tuesday and Clayton Adams like we will later today in the show. We'll talk to Brian Schottenheimer at the podium tomorrow. So it's always fun to kind of see where teams are at this point in the offseason because you've got free agency coming up, you've got the draft coming up, and for Dallas, certainly a lot of decisions that need to be made. Yeah,
and of course, I mean, we talk about it this whole offseason is the decisions will be heavy on the defensive side of the ball, especially with the, of course, missing pieces. You got contracts they have to negotiate, what Christian Parker wants to establish here in Dallas. I want to touch on that, though, first, because we did hear from Stephen Jones when we first arrived on Tuesday. What's kind of like your confidence level in the direction that the Cowboys are heading into this offseason with everything that they have done so far this offseason?
Well, I'll tell you, Stephen Jones' confidence level is high, and we asked him yesterday. I kind of phrase it this way because when I'm looking back at the times that Dallas has had 2 first-round picks, 2008 was the last time, and then the last time before that was 2005. So it was 4 years apart, and this reminds me a lot of what 2005 looked like because the Cowboys in 2005 were making a scheme change from a 4-3 to a 3-4 under Mike Zimmer, who was the defensive coordinator at the time. He still was there the year prior, so it wasn't a new defensive coordinator, but Bill Parcells wanted a different look. And they had 2 first-round picks, and they just weren't very good on defense in 2004. So you fast forward now 21 years later to 2026, you weren't very good on defense in 2025. You have a new defensive coordinator that has said he's going to bring a 3-4 scheme, although it is going to be multiple and have 4-3 spacing, and you have 2 first-round picks. So I asked him, does it ring bells maybe a little bit? Do you feel like there's something that you learned from that process that you can bring to this? And he did say there are some flashes of that 2005 year when it comes to this, but the most important part, he said, I think we can get accomplished everything we need to get accomplished personnel-wise. And certainly on the defensive side of the ball, it seems like that's a lot. And, one of the things that he kept pointing back to was how Seattle and New England did that this past year in free agency. So is that a point towards, okay, the Cowboys might be a little bit more aggressive than we've seen in years past in free agency? We don't know. Obviously, you have to see it before you believe it. They get out and get Javonte Williams done early, but what's that going to look like when March 11th comes around and free agency is open? So at least it seems like they are keeping the door open to, we're going to make moves in free agency. And he got asked if they were moving different this offseason, and he kind of said no, like we're keeping the process the same. But you have heard some buzz of, this. They seem like they could make more moves in free agency, but again, that's all just speculative. They've got to go out and do it.
Yep.
And that's the biggest component.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I mentioned on one of the podcasts a couple of weeks ago is that they've got to have the personnel to get what Christian Parker wants done. It's not just Christian Parker coming in here and you're going to be able to do what with what you have, right? And that'll take some conversations with a Quinnen Williams. It'll take some conversations with a Kenny Clark, who I believe Stephen Jones was asked about this Monday when the reporters showed up a little earlier, and he had said that it's going to take all of that, right? And so they've gotten, like you mentioned, Javonte Williams done, of course, possibly franchise tagging George Pickens. So a lot of movement around to make some things happen in free agency. But I still want to stick with that topic of conversation because I'd asked Stephen Jones about, have there been any conversations with the Jadeveon Clowney? He said no, not yet. And so do you feel like he fits this 3-4 scheme with what Christian Parker wants to do?
Well, what's interesting about it is Stephen is saying no, they haven't had conversations yet isn't necessarily the end-all, be-all of, all right,
that's fair.
Jadeveon Clowney's not coming back next year. But it is interesting to hear the kind of shift that has gone on there because back in December, Stephen was adamant of, hey, we absolutely want Jadeveon Clowney back.
Yeah.
Now you make a defensive coordinator change, and he said yesterday, they're going to work through it with Christian Parker and kind of see what his vision is and what type of player he wants. So while I'm not saying okay, Jadeveon Clowney is going to play elsewhere in 2026, I'm saying you can see that there's been a change in the way that the Cowboys have talked about Clowney. And I think obviously your defensive coordinator change that has a big piece to do with it because Christian Parker could very well say at some point this week, oh yeah, Jadeveon Clowney would be perfect for this. We could put him, on the outside as an outside linebacker, have him put his arm out and play against the run, which he did really well, I thought, in 25. Or he led us in sacks last year. We can try and put him in situations to get after the passer. You may not want a 33-year-old to be your top pass rusher, but nonetheless, if it works, it works. Yeah. But I just will say that there has been a change. Sure, there was a change defensive coordinator too, but that was an interesting way that was placed yesterday too, I thought.
Who benefits the most from this 3-4 scheme, in your opinion?
Well, like we talked about, it's you kind of take 3-4 with a grain of salt because it's going to be multiple. They're going to be spaced at 4-3, so it's not going to be your textbook 3-4 look. I think really who benefits the most is the fact that Christian Parker wants to capitalize on the 3 big defensive tackles that Dallas has, and then because of that, if you get a pass rush, everybody benefits. Yeah. That in my opinion, that's how you win in the NFL on defense. If you can affect the quarterback, which Christian Parker talked about in his opening press conference, that makes your secondary better, it makes your linebackers better, and if you get interior pressure especially, it's so hard to deal with for quarterbacks because they don't have anywhere to step up. So you got Quinnen Williams, you got Kenny Clark, you've got Oso Digizua. You might have to work some things around monetarily with those guys, but I mean, you have everything that you need to generate interior pressure. Now it's just a matter of can you get the presence on the edge so that opposing offenses don't just cave in on the 3 guys you've got at the line of scrimmage who are big dudes. But I think really if that is truly how they're going to approach this and they're going to be a line of scrimmage team like Christian Parker said he is, then I think the big defensive tackles benefit the most because if they succeed and they get after the quarterback, it makes everybody's jobs easier.
Yeah, I want to switch gears because, like I've mentioned before, we are at the Combine, got to talk Combine. I want to get your thoughts on, is there a player that kind of intrigues you the most heading into what we're expecting to hear from a couple of guys in a few, but is there a player that intrigues you the most that you're looking forward to the most?
There's so many.
You got to choose one.
Okay, I'll do Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State, because I could very well see this being a week. He's been mocked a lot to the Cowboys at 12. I could very well see this being a week where he plays himself into the top 10, or he tests himself into the top 10, I should say.
Yeah.
He's a freak athlete, and he's big, longer arms, and he's one of those guys that moved from safety down to linebacker, and you couldn't really tell there was much of a transition over the past couple of years because he just made it look so easy. I don't think he had a missed tackle last year for Ohio State. God. And you combine the tackling ability with his ability in coverage because he has that safety background, and you really just get a versatile chess piece that, if he was to go to Dallas, immediately can become your middle linebacker and handle those responsibilities because he can do everything, and you can play off of that. So that would be one that's it could be a core piece for Dallas or whoever decides to draft him. But because he's so good athletically, you wonder if he brings himself into that top 10 conversation. So if you're the Cowboys this week, man, you are rooting for these offensive players to have the best combines of their life. Like, this needs to be the best offensive combine ever. And teams need to fall in love with, maybe a second quarterback. Like if Ty Simpson blows everybody out of the water and he goes top 10, what does that look like? If, one of these wide receivers like a Mekhi Lemon from USC or not Jacoby Lamb, I'm sorry, Carnell Tate from Ohio State or Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, if they blow somebody out of the water, could all three of those guys go before the Cowboys if teams like them enough? That's what Dallas is rooting for. So that a guy like Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State, or one of these pass rushers, a David Bailey from Texas Tech or Ruben Bain from Miami can get to 12. That's what you're rooting for this week.
That's fair. All right, before we take our first break here on Podcast Nation Combine Edition, I want to know if there's one thing that the Cowboys leave Indianapolis saying. What should that be?
Wow, that's a good question.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Or what do you think it'll be?
I think they leave with a pretty good idea of what they want to do with their picks. Do you maybe start to try and feel out if there's a trade? It may even go till draft day. I don't know if it's something that you necessarily want to pull off now because you can get more value for your picks on draft day if somebody's calling you to try and move up. Yeah. But do they come away from this and say, we don't know if there's the top-heavy difference makers that we feel like we can get in this class? Would it maybe be more beneficial for us to move one of those picks? Or on the flip side of the coin, do they say, man, there are some guys we feel like we can get in this top 20 that can really help us out, and we're staying put? So I think by the time they talk to all these prospects and they get the testing numbers and put eyes on them, they're going to come out of this week with a better idea of what they want to do strategy-wise.
I think that's the fun part about NFL Combine is there's so many unknowns, but you're really expecting that the Cowboys have a clear vision. From what they have said, everybody's aligned, but you hope that they leave here with a clear vision of what they want to do in free agency and also for the 2026 NFL Combine. But we've got to take our first break here on Podcast Nation. But up next, we've got Nick Harris from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram breaking down some of the positions that he feels like the Cowboys are meeting with the most here at the NFL Combine. And later in the show, we've got offensive coordinator Clayton Adams joining to talk about the next steps for this Dallas Cowboys offense. But we got to take our first break here. We'll be right back.
If you can't be at the stadium, there's no better way to watch your Cowboys than on an LG OLED Evo TV. That's because everything you see is more lifelike. Every play, every hit. I mean, you might as well be on the sidelines. That's how clear it is. It's all thanks to LG's legendary technology. Perfect black, over 8.3 million self-lit pixels. No one comes close. LG OLED Evo is the best TV in the game for a reason. See for yourself at lg.com/OLED Evo.
Hey y'all, Matt Pittman of Meat Church here. As a Yeti ambassador and the official pitmaster of the Dallas Cowboys, I proudly represent two of the toughest brands out there. My Yeti coolers are perfect for hot holding barbecue like smoked brisket and ribs, or keeping beer on ice on those hot game days. Customized with a Cowboys star, America's toughest coolers and drinkware are repping America's toughest team. Keep yourself in some good company and get your officially licensed Yeti Cowboys gear at Stadium Pro Shops, concessions, and on Yeti.com.
Every day begins with a promise to work hard and to build a future. That's why we're here, providing the tools, expertise, and John Deere equipment you have relied on for generations to help you get the job done right. We're with you. That's our promise to you. Because no matter the project or the challenge you're facing,
we're with you. We're united. If you shout, "How about them Cowboys?" you have that undeniable passion that's the heart of Cowboys Nation. And if you like to drink Dr. Pepper, you love the unique blend of its 23 flavors. Together, your one-of-a-kind fandom paired with the one-of-a-kind taste of a delicious ice-cold Dr. Pepper is the game day lineup that can't be beat. Better yet, gather your Cowboys and Dr. Pepper fan friends to watch the next game and crack open a delicious ice-cold Dr. Pepper for everyone. The wins will be even tastier. It's a pepper thing.
Cowboys fans, here's the game plan. Touchdown Tuesday at Take 5 Oil Change. Just wear your Cowboys gear and save 25% on your oil change. No huddle, no overtime. Just drive in, stay in your car, and roll out. You'll be tailgate ready in 10 minutes flat. Keeping up with your car shouldn't be a tough call. Take 5 makes it as easy as calling the coin toss. Take 5 is the official oil change of the Dallas Cowboys. Visit take5.com to find a location near you. Offer valid through December 31st, 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Valid only at participating locations.
Back to the Cowboys Nation podcast.
All right, guys, this is Podcast Nation. Welcome back into Indianapolis, Indiana. Nicole Hutchison, Tommy Yarish, and very own Nick Harris with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Nick, obviously, we're going to get straight to it as well. You've been covering the Combine. You've been covering a lot of these players, but I want to stick with this Cowboys offense. When you look at Dallas compared to other teams in the NFL right now, do you feel like this roster feels a little close? What are some of the missing pieces, you think?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, you talk about quick turnarounds, and we just saw 2 teams in the Super Bowl that had some quick turnarounds. And I thought it was interesting that Stephen Jones also noted that earlier this week on a couple of occasions with you guys as well. But I think when you look at the construction of this offense and you see how productive it was a year ago, and Stephen Jones saying that there's not really anything left to do except for getting Pickens done and getting Pickens figured out. On the defensive side of the ball, they still have guys. You know, it didn't work out for them last year, but I think with the full offseason with Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark, being able to, you know, marry that defensive interior with Osa Digizua, and then getting Savone Revel and Deron Bland both 100% healthy this offseason. Get DeMarvion Overshown back in a system where he can thrive and he can have a full offseason for the first time in his NFL career. I think you marry all those things together, and it could allow the Cowboys to kind of fit in the holes, fit in the pieces where they need to find more depth on the defensive side, and certainly find more starting caliber talent. Then you have the 2 first-round picks at your avail. You have the new defensive coordinator. There's a lot of things that are working for the defense's favor right now, and that's the whole idea of this offseason, right, is to figure out how to get out of the basement of the league when it came to defensive production a year ago. 32nd in pass defense, 30th in total yards allowed. And I think with, you know, not only bringing in Christian Parker, but being able to dedicate so many resources out here in Indianapolis to scouting this premier defensive talent, it should allow them to be able to have an opportunity to bounce back soon. I'm not going to sit here and say that they will, because a lot of different factors play into that, but I think they are setting themselves up to have that opportunity, no doubt.
And defensively, because that's just been so much of what the conversation's about, and we've talked so much on the draft show about these 2 first-round picks, and you look at some of the teams in the past that have hit on both of those 2 first-round picks. Seattle did it 3 years ago with Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you can turn things around so quickly with that, but it feels like you need that and to spend in free agency or to do something in free agency to supplement the rest of your roster. How do you feel like this group is going to attack that portion of it? Because it does come first, and you have to set that up before you set your draft up. And what are you kind of getting a sense of how they want to approach this free agent cycle to be able to go into the draft where they take their typical approach of, we want to take the best player available?
Yeah, I think if you look at it from both sides of the coin, you mentioned the Seattle Seahawks' success in having their 2 first-round picks, getting JSN and Devin Witherspoon. They spent in free agency, and they continued to build that roster, and they were Super Bowl champions this last year. The New York Jets drafted Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson in the first round. What was that, back in 21 or 22? And both of them won defensive rookie of the year and offensive rookie of the year. And now Sauce Gardner is out the building, and Garrett Wilson can't find a quarterback because they haven't fit in the pieces around them. So I think you could see both sides of that coin and what that looks like, whether when you invest into your roster and when you don't. Now, granted, New York, they just had some bad luck at times too, like Aaron Rodgers destroying his calf on the 3rd snap of the year a couple of years ago. But I think with the Cowboys specifically, it's interesting talking to some of the national media people out here because they sense a little bit of different movement by the Cowboys this offseason. I have to see that manifested when March 11th comes and free agency opens. And what does that look like? You know, I mean, last year they signed Dante Fowler to a 1-year, $6 million contract. That was the richest average per year contract that they've signed in free agency since 2015. And so I'm going to need to see more of that and a lot more of that. The Seattle Seahawks alone spent more than $6 million per year on 6 free agents last offseason. And the total money that they put into free agents last offseason accounted for almost a third of their salary cap this last year. And so when you look at, teams that have constructed their roster the right way and have found themselves playing in that final game, you typically see free agency involvement. I mean, look at the other side with the New England Patriots that lost in the Super Bowl. They went out and invested in Milton Williams. They went out and invested in Stephon Diggs and some pieces around their defense as well. And so you're going to have to be able to do that. And I think for the Cowboys, again, it stays on the defensive side of the ball. You have a guy in Christian Parker who has a lot of experience around the league with assistants that have experience around the league. They're going to have a lot of intel on a lot of these free agents that are coming in. It's going to be interesting to see which ones develop coming out of not only this week, but certainly in free agency.
Let me ask you something, because we've had this talk about free agency since I've been here. Of course, I know it's probably happened since years before. But last year, I don't think the issue is not, so to speak, attacking free agency. It's just they haven't hit in free agency. Because last year you talk about a Logan Wilson who was injured for most of the year, Kenneth Murray who didn't necessarily give you the stability at the linebacker position that you expected him to. How important is it for them to hit on free agency this year compared to years past? And what are some options that the Cowboys that best fit the Cowboys, so to speak?
I'll contend with you on one point. I mean, I feel like that they did hit in certain areas. Javonte Williams was obviously a huge bargain bin find, and being able to sign him on the deal that they did, and then obviously bringing him back for the long term. It's just more so about finding that hit rate, right? And I think, that's not something you really know until you get the guy in the building. And, Dante Fowler, for example, take him for example. And, that was a guy who was coming off of 10.5 sacks in Washington. He had experience in the building. Everything on paper said that Dante Fowler should have been a premier pass rusher for the Cowboys last season, and it just didn't work that way, And I don't think anyone at the time was looking at a 1-year, $6 million deal for Dante Fowler and being like, what are they doing? It was very justified, and it just didn't work out for Dante Fowler last year. And whoever you want to pin that on is up to you. I think there were a lot of different factors that played into that. But it's really about not knowing until you get that guy in the building. But I think with the experience that this defensive staff has around the league, and the experience that they've had in each of their respective careers, I think it's going to give them a lot of background to be able to make some key decisions here in free agency.
We've gotten to talk to Christian Parker now, and we kind of have seen his outline and what he wants to do for this defense. What do you feel like benefits the most from Christian Parker being the Cowboys defensive coordinator?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the layer of unknown, at least in this first year, really helps because he's going to go into a week 1 matchup and the opposing side's not really going to know what's going to be thrown at them. They can have an understanding, and it's going to have Vic Fangio principles, and but there's going to be little nuances to Christian Parker's scheme that he's already talked about that we're not going to know until it hits the field in week 1. And then as defenses adjust through that first 6 weeks, through that first trimester, as Mike McCarthy liked to call it, it's going to be interesting to see how teams adjust to whatever Christian Parker ends up throwing on the field. So by the time we get to week 5, week 6, that'll really be the first time that opposing teams will have enough opposing scout information to be able to really scout Christian Parker and what he brings to the table. But again, that's for any first-year play caller, and that's the advantage that's kind of built in for those first-year play callers. Schottenheimer had it last year, and even though he wasn't a first-time play caller, it was first time in a few years, and he was able to kind of throw that element of unknown out there for the first few weeks, and it worked out great for this offense last season. So I would say that, but also, we've heard over and over again about his teaching ability and how that teaching ability has really showed up already, even in these assistant meetings and personnel meetings. I'm fascinated to see what that looks like for players like Savone Revel, because I think this year too is so important for him. Deron Bland, how does that help him once he gets back to full health? Even in the front 7, he's dedicated so much time and energy into figuring out what this front 7 looks like, and I think that's fascinating for a guy who comes from a secondary background. It should be an exciting hire for Cowboys fans, and I'm excited to see what that looks like on the field.
Based on last year's season, have you had any conversations with maybe the coaches or inside information on just the positions that the Cowboys are possibly spending their most time with? Do you know anything?
Defense.
Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, defense.
That's the obvious one, right? I think one position to really keep an eye on this offseason is nickel corner. And I whoever they end up putting at that nickel spot is going to be very crucial toward the success of this defense early on. Whether that is, Deron Bland coming back and fitting that role, or it's going out and drafting a guy like a Caleb Downs if he's somehow able to slip to you there at 12. But there's also some really talented slot corners around this entire draft class, or if it's going out in free agency and grabbing one of the veterans out there, trading for a veteran that could fit that role. Because, Christian Parker talked about it in his introductory press conference about how that nickel corner spot is so valuable to not only a defense, but his defense. And that's going to be really important to track, I think, over this offseason.
Building this offense and this defense, building all the pieces, really. This roster is going to be crucial this offseason, and, of course, it starts with the draft. But thank you, Nick. We appreciate you always, my guy. But we've got more coming up on Podcast Nation here, Combine Edition. Talking with offensive coordinator Clayton Adams. What's next for this offense? That's up next.
At AT&T, we guarantee our network so you can talk college football with your BFF while taking Buster to the vet.
Hey, yeah, I can't believe he ate the whole thing of chicken wings.
And I can't believe we're staging a comeback. Touchdown! Yes!
Staying connected matters. That's why in the rare event of a network outage, you'll automatically get a bill credit for a full day's service. For wireless downtime lasting 60 minutes or more caused by a single incident impacting 10 or more towers, must be connected to impacted tower at onset of outage. Restrictions and exclusions apply. See att.com/guarantee for full details.
If you can't be at the stadium, there's no better way to watch your Cowboys than on an LG OLED Evo TV. That's because everything you see is more lifelike. Every play, every hit. I mean, you might as well be on the sidelines. That's how clear it is. It's all thanks to LG's legendary technology. Perfect black, over 8.3 million self-lit pixels. No one comes close. LG OLED Evo is the best TV in the game for a reason. See for yourself at lg.com/OLED Evo.
It's the official men's skincare brand of the Dallas Cowboys, Jack Black. And right now, Cowboys fans can get 15% off their $75 order. Plus, because every deal needs a playmaker, your order will include a free 5-piece skincare set and free shipping. The Jack Black Playmaker is 4 of Jack's favorites and a full-sized intense therapy lip balm. Make a play for the playmaker at getjackblack.com/Cowboys with the code CowboysVIP. That's getjackblack.com/Cowboys with the code CowboysVIP.
How's it going? You see that Cowboys game?
Oh, I watched. Been seeing some good things.
Totally. They have some talent.
Yup, some great talent.
And they got some fight.
Hoping this is the year.
Me too. Oh, I'm Cody, by the way.
I'm Travis.
Nice to meet you, Travis. Go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys!
Make a new friend based solely on their shirt choice. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America, the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys. Copyright 2025 Bank of America Corporation.
From the field to the festivities, Lucchese embodies the essence of luxury and tradition. Handcrafted with meticulous precision, each pair offers unmatched comfort and style. Stand tall while you're tailgating or cheering in the stands with the Dallas Cowboys collection by Lucchese. Shop the collection today at the Lucchese store at the Star in Frisco or online at lucchese.com. Lucchese, the official boot of the Dallas Cowboys and Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Back to the Cowboys Nation podcast.
All right, welcome back into Podcast Nation, coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana. We've got Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Clayton Adams joined with us, Nicole Hutchison, Tommy Yarsh, and I know you've got some things to do, Clayton, so we're going to get straight to it. First, Coach, when you evaluate the 2025 season, what did you learn most about your offense?
Just that I think we really started kind of clicking on what the expectations are late in the season. Not that there weren't some things that we felt good about early in the season, but there's a difference when you feel a sense of familiarity with a group and you finish an install on a Wednesday and you walk out of the room kind of united, everybody going, I know exactly what to expect. I feel good about the plan. So I think that, we can really dive into that, with a head start in 2026.
Yeah.
One of the things that it was so big for you guys was the run game, and now you bring Javonte back. He signed a 3-year deal. How important was he to the overall success of your offense, and what does bringing him back mean for what you want to do going forward?
Well, I think he's a huge part of it, not just for the run game. I mean, he does a lot for us in pass protection. He's a good leader. He's a good teammate. And really, just making it as simple as possible is if you got George Pickens on one side and you got CeeDee Lamb on the other side, he's one of our kind of aspects or ways that we take advantage of the middle of the defense. And so, being able to not necessarily just jam the ball down the middle all the time, but really having the ability to beat up the inside of the defense with those two guys on the outside, it just makes us more whole.
You brought up George and CD. At the end of the year, you were talking about how one of the things you wanted to do this offseason was really dive into everything from last year and look at, okay, how can we capitalize even more on having those two guys at wide receiver? How much of that have you already started to do, and what are some of the – I know you won't share specific X's and O's so you don't give away your hand, but what have you found as to, okay, these are some of the things that we can do more with them in order to be even better on offense next season?
We're into the self-scout. Really what I would say that I've learned so far is just sitting in on all these defensive coordinator interviews that we were doing in the early part of the offseason, of just hearing specifically how some of the teams that we're playing against are trying to defend us, and some of the things that concern them or worry them is good for me to hear, because quite frankly, I'm not always thinking of it from that exact same perspective. And so just hearing some of the things that people are saying, hey, this is what kept me up at night, or this is what we were really worried that you guys were going to do, it gives me thoughts and ideas on how we want to attack and use those guys moving forward.
I love that you mentioned that, because that's something that new defensive coordinator Christian Parker mentioned in his press conferences, that those guys kept him up at night when you guys played them. But when you go back to the running game, obviously the season is long, and you need a backup running back to kind of take the load off of Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, obviously year 2 for him, and Phil Maffa as well. What have you seen from Jaden Blue, obviously this offseason? What are you looking forward for him to take that next steps in year 2?
I think just continuing to mature into a professional football player is a process that everybody kind of has to go through, and it's a different journey for every person that comes in here. So his journey is going to be a little bit different than Maffa's journey, and all those guys, their journey is a little bit different than Tyler Booker's journey. So just continuing to mature into a professional football player that can handle their business. And it's not just one person either, right? Like, it takes a village to run the football. So at the end of the season last year, we're playing with guys that weren't necessarily active on game day in the beginning of the season. So we really need every single person in that room to be ready to carry the flag when they're called upon.
And what's the challenge of, as an offensive mind, what's the challenge of not staying so stagnant when teams do now have tape on you and the film on you?
It's not hard for me, because I get bored, and I always kind of want to push and see what the next thing is going to be, and that's one of the things that, in my opinion, is fun late in the season, is like, how do we build upon what we've done? And looking at your self-scout from earlier in the season, like, oh man, that was cool. Sometimes you forget some of the things that you did earlier in the season, and that's where, like, having the Thursday game or having the bye week can be good for you as a coach, because sometimes it'll shed some light or give you some perspective on, why haven't we gotten back to that, or how do we build off of something that we've done. To me, that's probably one of the funnest parts.
To go off of that, how do you balance, yes, keeping those things that are working for you while also recognizing that, like she mentioned, teams are not necessarily going to catch up, but they've got a year's worth of film of what Brian's play calling looks like in Dallas and what's working well. How do you mix what for you is your role in helping him come up with new concepts that you feel like can still work and you still take advantage of all the pieces that you have, while also keeping what's been working for you and in the past?
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that we're constantly having. There's no such thing. People like I'm not sure where it came from, but everybody's got like this term like, oh, we're going to run it back, or we're just going to kind of roll it back out there. And to me, that's the worst mindset that you can possibly have, is, all right, here's some stuff that worked last year. Let's just try it again. Having said that, you've also got to understand what your core building blocks are and who you are as an offense, and that's going to change a little bit every year as well. But in my opinion, if you just go back out there and you're like, here it is, there's too many good football players in this league, and there's too many good coaches in this league for that to work. And so you've got to be constantly trying to seek the edge and find the sharper points of how you can get better, and that's what the offseason's about, in my opinion, is, you've got the player acquisition piece, which is why we're here, but all of these conversations that we're having in private with other coaches sometimes, or college guys, they're all just seeking edges is what we're trying to do.
And on the offensive line, with your tackles specifically, Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele, as you've watched what they've put on tape this past year, where do you feel like you guys are at going into 2026? That's seemingly a big talking point because of Terrence's contract and whether or not he returns next year. Do you feel like you can continue to capitalize off of both of those two guys, and what do you feel like they did well this past year as you've gotten to watch it back?
Yeah, obviously the most important thing for a young player, specifically talking about Tyler Guyton, is you got to get out there and you got to play, and that's the part I know that he's been the most frustrated with is he plays really well in training camp, and then he got dinged up, and then he starts coming back really without having much of a training camp, and then then he gets dinged again. So he's just been a little bit unlucky in that way, and so we've got to get him to the one of the metrics that I always kind of think of in my head for a young player is like that 20 to 25 starts. Once you can get a guy through that first 20 to 25 starts, you can really start seeing those guys kind of self-reflecting and sometimes kind of modernizing their game on their own a little bit, which is always fun to see. And then specifically for Terrence, like I just think that there's a ton of good things that he's doing, and the margins are smaller as you get later in your career for the type of improvement that you specifically want to be able to make. But, we've got an improvement plan ready for him for, probably 7 or 8 different things that maybe he hasn't worked on in his career. And so I can certainly see some of the benefits of the way that the guy works. But, he's an absolute pro, and we're going to continue to find ways to help him get better.
Have there been any more conversations of possibly moving Guyton out to right tackle or anything like that? I know that was a big topic of conversation this later in the season of 2025. Have there been any more conversations about that?
That's not something that we've gotten into so far this offseason. I mean, at the end of the day, to get your best 5 guys out there, anything's on the table, but that specifically hasn't been one.
All right, talking about the combine, obviously we're here. We've got to talk about it. Have there been any guys that stand out? What kind of impresses you about this offensive line class or just this offensive class as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, obviously depth of the running back group will be something that we'll take a look at today in some of the formal interviews. I actually just got here yesterday afternoon, so I'll get to my first formal interview this morning, and so I haven't really gotten to spend a whole bunch of time with the guys. But when you look at the group as a whole on tape, I think what you see is potentially like non-traditional positions at premium spots high in the first round, but you really like a lot what you see, particularly on the offensive line.
All right, well, we know you got to go. We appreciate you so much, Clayton. Thank you for hopping on
Thank you.
Podcast Nation. We'll be coming to you live from Indianapolis all week long. I know you got to go, so you're fine. We'll come to you from Indianapolis all week long. From Stephen Jones's message, we're breaking it all down here. We have player interviews, possibly. We have coaches interviews. We have everything here. Right here on Podcast Nation, so make sure to tune in to DallasCowboys.com. But signing off for Nicole Hutchison, Tommy Yards, we'll be back here tomorrow.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!